Hey guys, it's Pete from Pete for Anxiety here, the mental health podcast, breaking the stigma that mental health is talked about. Welcome in today's episode. Before we get started today, we need to cover a few things really quick. Let's talk about the Pete for Anxiety Patreon first off. It's only $1, guys. $1. What does $1 get you? $1 gets you into the exclusive episodes I am recording currently. I'm actually focusing on certain different diagnoses of things to show you guys what it actually looks like as it manifests in a person. So why not for $1, judges? Yeah, they said $1. I just checked with them too. See, they said it was okay. It was $1 anyways. Let's also talk about the Oracle Talk Radio Networks app. In case you can't be here live listening to me, watching this video, supporting the show, you can listen to it on the radio app. Why not? It connects us live to our 365 radio. Just go to your app stores and download the Oracle Talk Radio Network. You'll see the big old Oracle Talk Radio Network app logo right on there. Download it and it'll connect you to me, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, to Pete vs. Anxiety when I'm live doing my thing right here, informing the world and raising mental health awareness. So where are you going to be? 10 a.m. Of course. Come on. We just talked about this. Pay attention for once. Damn. Do y'all know how to listen? And as always, guys, like, follow, and share the YouTube channel. If you guys like what you're seeing, leave some comments, man. We want to know. I want to know if you like what we're on. You want to be on the show? Let me know. Hit me up at PeteVersusAnxietyPod@gmail.com. And as always, guys, enjoy the show. And by the way, did I mention to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure because some of y'all are hard of hearing in the back, may have to yell loud or get a megaphone or something. But, anyways, let's get today's show started. Y'all have a great one. Enjoy. Guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety, the mental health podcast, breaking the stigma that mental health is talked about enough. My guest today is the author of the Scream Therapy, A Punk Journey Through Mental Health, and an internationally renowned host of the Scream Therapy podcast, the one, the only, Jason Schreurs. How you doing, buddy?
Good, Pete. How are you doing?
Good, man. Well, thank you for coming, man. I appreciate it. So, how did you get started on the whole Scream Therapy thing? I mean, it's so interesting to hear that you're combining music and mental health together, because I think a lot of people apply them together at first, because a lot of times you always have that music, that song. It always makes you feel better when you're in a down mood. So,
yeah, for sure. It's something that I kind of subscribed to my whole life. Getting into punk rock when I was a kid, and all through my teen years, my adult years, and using it as a place to feel welcome and that I belonged. And the music, like you said, it really hits you and helps you through hard times. It wasn't until I got really unwell and had a major mental health crisis that I actually got into the idea of combining the two for a podcast and a book. So coming home from the hospital after being diagnosed with bipolar and having a psychotic break, it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Like I'm just completely beaten down. I'm starting from scratch. I had done a lot of things, previous to that, in music and writing. So it just seemed natural to get into it and put the two together as a way of my whole journey of, getting back on my feet.
Yeah, that's awesome though, man. I mean, first off, sorry to hear that you had to have a psychotic break before you get there. But I mean, at least you looked at it on the other side and said, hey, what am I going to do something instead of letting this thing own me and make me put a label on me saying just because I have bipolar doesn't mean, I have to be treated differently,
Yeah. And I feel like at first it did own me. And I think that happens with a lot of people, going through that and realizing that there's something going on like that. It does consume a person. It consumed me for a while. And it was the kind of a process of getting back on the way to being well. And a huge part of that was actually talking to people like you and other folks who are on my podcast and starting to write about the topic of mental health in my own life. That was a huge part of the process of, getting back to where I wanted to be.
Yeah, and it was so interesting too when I read punk rock. I'm like, man, dude, I like punk rock too, And I didn't get into it until high school, like we were saying right before I hit record here, and it was I still I love it. I listen to metal. I listen to everything now, but I listen to a lot of punk rock, like Anti-Flag, Black Flag, Poison Ivy, Operation Ivy, and all those kind of things. Like the Clash was a big one when I was younger because my mom was a big Ramones fan and stuff like that too. So we'd listen to that all the time. And I had a little splash of everything as it started coming down. And then I started discovering it on my own a little more. I went deeper and checked out some of the other stuff. And I started to really like it, the fast pace and things like that. Those days when you're just like, you need to pick me up, you turn it on and just the guitar just starts going and you're just like, oh, you start feeling that amping up and going on everything too.
Yeah. And it's not vapid music. There's a message there too, which I think is, it's really important for music to have an effect on you. Mm-hmm. It has to also have a message to it. And punk rock's always been about, looking at authority figures and politics. And from what I found out kind of after doing a bunch of research, a lot of ties to mental health, right back to the Ramones and bands all through the decades of punk have always had a tie to writing songs about mental health and dealing with mental health conditions themselves.
That's so cool though that that you discovered all that as you go, and then you're realizing, hey, I have these things, so what am I going to do? So how did the book come to picture? Is it like a story of your life, or is it basically like, hey, this is what I'm going to do now that I know I have this thing. I'm going to make something of it.
A bit of both. I mean, it's very much a memoir, what they call a memoir plus. So it's my
Hmm.
story of a time in my life. In this case, my relationship to my mental health, but also I talked to other punks in the book that have their own experiences, including a lot of mental health professionals that have had upbringings in the punk scene, and so they're in there as well. And I sort of tie it together with myself and speaking to them and learning about them. So it's not at all like a self help therapy
Hmm.
book. It's more a creative nonfiction writing book, and it's it's got a lot going on with it, but I think it ties together really nicely. It's a quick read, and it's got a forward momentum through the whole thing, which I think is good for that kind of a book.
Yeah, especially memoirs are great though. I just finished reading actually this one. I hear she'll be a guest here about 2 o'clock. It's called "The Mansectomy I've Always Wanted" by Erica Campbell, and it was talking about how she had breast cancer and things like that. And I've been interested now. There's I've been reading these memoirs. I'm like, man, now I'm gonna have to read yours too. I'm like, I saw it in your profile. I'm like, damn, now I gotta go get a copy of this thing and read it because I'm interested to see, how it goes. Because hers was interesting. The way she did it was like she told the story of everything going on. And then she put these nice little poems in there too, of just things related to
Oh,
different
cool.
codes. And it was kind of cool though that she added them in there. And the end of the book, holy crap! Like talk about putting yourself out there. She had actual pictures after the operations and stuff on there, and for her to put that in a book and let people see that. I mean, that's powerful in its own. Like, that's putting yourself out there full blank slate for people to see, and things like that. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's two aspects to that. Number one is that writing is a form of healing. So,
mhm.
it's putting yourself out there as a way to have, kind of process things yourself and to have therapeutic value for yourself as you're writing it, but also to put it out there so other people can relate to it and hopefully, share experiences with what they see in the book. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's for me, it was very much like at first, it's very much like I've got to write this thing. I can't move on in my life until I write this thing.
Yeah.
Um, and then it got into more like, okay, so how do I tell this story in a way that's going to be compelling for people to read? And it ended up being, there's some interspersed parts about touring in a band, and sort of when I was on this tour with this band, it got really, really sketchy and hairy for me, and that led into some other problems. And so it's like it's a way of really like expressing myself, but also saying like, look, this is what happened, and can you relate?
Yeah,
Especially
it's
with the
like
punk stuff, can you
it's kind
relate
of
to
like
being in the
an
punk scene?
eyewitness encounter, though. Like you're telling the story through your eyes. Like this is what's going on. This is what I'm
Yeah.
dealing with currently, and I like those. And I'm liking memoirs a lot more. I'm starting to read more, and let me tell you, memoirs are starting to become my thing because I love being able to see through other people's eyes with things they're dealing with, and you could feel the emotion too, because the way this is your thought process going on, so people know what you're thinking as this stuff is going on. And that hairy situation coming up, you're just like, oh yeah, hey, something
Yeah.
don't feel right about this.
Yeah.
So, did the
Yeah.
book lead into the idea of the podcast? Not to cut you off.
I think it was the other way around. Well, maybe not. It kind of came simultaneously. So what happens when I came home from the hospital? Again, I was beaten down. I was still in sort of the throes of a manic episode, and then I was crashing into depression because the way that bipolar works is like you go high and then you go low. That's the
Yeah.
basic pattern of it. And so I kind of just wrote in a notebook because crashed out on the couch. Wrote a notebook that I'd like to do. I wrote down scream therapy just as a phrase that I'd used in my journalism, punk rock journalism through the years. I'd often use that phrase. And then I wrote down podcast and book. And I think the idea was to do them kind of at the same time, but I wasn't able to get back to writing because my brain was just really shook up by the psychotic episode. So what I did is I started doing the podcast first, just talking to people like you and, guests from punk bands and whatnot, having conversations like this, which I found to be easier than actually sitting down and planning to write a book. And then the book started about a year and a half so after the podcast.
That's awesome though, man. And when you start doing the podcast, you're reaching out to people telling them this idea. How did they take the idea? Because sometimes it's like, You trying to get people on the show, was it easy or was it hard to find people that would come on and talk to you? Because some people don't want to share certain things, and some people are kind of like, well, I've never been on a podcast, and they're always hesitant because they're like, well, I've never been on one. What is it like?
Yeah, I think it's a testament to how much we talk more about mental health and how it's
Hmm.
perceived in the world. But I didn't have any trouble finding people. I didn't have any trouble with people saying they didn't want to talk about something or feeling, some people felt nervous, of course, but I wasn't getting a lot of roadblocks along the way. People were really happy to talk about their struggles and what they went through. And so that was really encouraging and validating to know that, people do want to talk about this stuff. And not only that, but it actually is the connection that I saw between punk rock and mental health was there, because like that was an idea that I had, but I didn't really know that it was only for myself. Right. So a lot of the guests would say, punk rock saved my life, which is one of the slogans of the book. And when I heard that for the first time from somebody else, it just was so emotional because that's what I had always thought. And it's actually the very first guest that I had on this show, Bianca from a band called Amygdala, who are actually from Texas. And she said that out of the blue. And I was like, whoa, like that's heavy. And it's come up so many times over the last 4 years that I've been doing it.
That's crazy too, because I had Lucy Lenore from Hunter on, and she told us that she had BPD, and like I never knew this beforehand. And she just started sharing with it, and she almost told us what it was that caused the whole situation too. That one traumatic event. It was so cool to see just someone that people idolize all the time. Got like all these different downloads, makes all this music, man. You see her all the time. Never would have an idea, and then she came on and literally just started opening up to me about it, and I was just like, that's so cool to see. Because it makes them human to most people. Like I know people idolize a lot of rock stars and things like that, but at the end of the day, like she said it best. She said, "I'm just a normal person." And that's got to be so cool though, meeting all these different bands and people coming on and talking about this and their different inspirations, and then the fact it started falling in line with yourself. Oh, dude, that had to be so much better too, because then you feel like you're not so alone and you're not the only person feeling like that.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the guest on your show too. You're creating this space, like it says right there, Pete versus anxiety. Like you're putting yourself out there. You're creating a space where we can talk about mental health, and when we have that space, then people really do open up because in regular life, you're not talking about it. Like you're
Yeah,
not like it's
exactly.
just not a thing. There might be a poster on the wall in the community center that says something about mental health, but you're not like having these kinds of conversations. There's no container to have them. Like I do support groups, those are containers, but they're also, they're behind doors, right? So I think that's why people feel comfortable opening up in these kinds of spaces, or, even for the book, people were really generous about opening up about their stories.
That'd be so cool though for you to tell somebody, well, hey, you're gonna be in this book. What do you think? Like, I would have been over the moon. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm in a book, man. And yeah, I am creating a safe space here. The great thing about it is that people that come on here it's so nice that they're willing to share their experiences. I know a lot of people at first are hesitant. It takes a lot of them to watch it and see how the conversation flows. And that's why I like to keep it more like conversational versus like sit there and ask them 20 questions, because I feel like when you start asking too many questions, you lose the authenticity of it. It's like it's cool, but we're here to have a conversation about mental health itself. And you're right, the poster thing actually resonates with a lot of things I say. It's like you see these people on all these social media sites posting these little clip. It's, oh well, it's suicide prevention month, or it's this month, and then after it the conversation ends. It's like, well, the conversation doesn't end for the rest of us that experience these
No.
things. And you can
Yeah.
agree to this too. It's crazy because it's like it's quote unquote clickbait. It aggravates me, but I get people trying to support it. But at the same time, if you're going to support it, understand the conversation doesn't end after that month. We still have, these are still things people deal with. And whatever
Yeah.
month it is, men's mental health, all this stuff. Because men's mental health is what turned me on to do this podcast. Because after I started doing some studies, I found out that men are more likely to commit suicide versus females, but females are more likely to talk to people about it versus men, because we're always taught not to say anything about our emotions and things like that. And the great thing about this is that, I have so many people that want to be on here. And I think after they come on here, they feel so empowered because it's like, I just went out there and shared my story. Now the world can hear it. And I've had some pretty crazy moments on here. I had a guy said he had thought about committing suicide that morning, man. He came on, Jason, like 30 minutes for the show, was like, came on 30 minutes into the conversation. He goes, hey, Pete, by the way, this morning I was thinking about, at foot of my bed sitting there. And he's going full description. And I'm just like, oh no, this is happening. What is he about to say next? Because, like, you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen when people start opening up. And it was so powerful because he had said it. He's so successful. Okay. that even he's having these problems, which leads you to the point of that everybody has issues, guys, no matter what part of life you're in, low, middle, high, whatever. We all have the same problems. Just because you see these people on TV doesn't mean they don't deal with issues in the back scene. You know, some of them are want to talk about it, some don't. Like Bert Kreischer, he talks about how bad his anxiety is all the time and things like that. And he's a big, talking about going to
Yeah.
therapy and things like that. And it's great to see that. But what about the little guys out there? And that's what this show's about. Those getting the littler people out here and having people such as yourself doing great things out there, so we can highlight, the Scream Therapy podcast, obviously, so people can go check it out and
Yeah.
and show some support for
Well, one of the things that, talking about the person who, was talking about dying by suicide, I mean, every day is suicide prevention day, really, because I mean,
Hmm.
I do crisis responding for youth. I do like basically I'm a crisis responder,
That's awesome.
and I mean, every day there's people who are suicidal or having suicidal ideation, or contemplating running away and never coming back. Like it's happening all the time, and youth are particularly um, affected by those things. And also, you mentioned about how like the idea that we all deal with these things. The number they always throw around out there is 1 in 4, 1 in 4, 1 in 4 people have a mental health condition. I mean, honestly, we all have something. Like I want to say one in one,
Hmm.
right? Like, I mean,
Exactly.
there's no one in my life who doesn't have some kind of struggle. Just because they don't have a diagnosis of schizophrenia or bipolar or anxiety, or doesn't mean that they're not either undiagnosed or still
Hmm.
struggling with those issues.
That's a real
It's
good point, Jason, man. That's a
everywhere,
real good
and
point.
that it normalizes it, which isn't always great, because we don't want to like downplay it, but at the same time, it does, I think, make it more easier for people to open up about those things, and also easier to get help, which
Hmm.
wasn't a thing 30 years ago. Like if you were suffering from, let's say, generalized depression, where do you get help? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Where can you go to find help and things like that? And the great thing with the show is I have other people on that come on that do different areas of mental health too. That say therapy isn't your slide. You want to try something else. All these people have all these different things, and I leave all their contact information, how to get a hold of them, everything like that. I have other people that come and share their own stories and things like that too. And it's great, because every day I get to meet somebody new and I make a new connection with somebody about something, or I discover something new about myself and I learn new things as I go. And it's great because not only am I learning things, the listeners are getting to hear things, people get to support it, and the conversation just keeps growing stronger the more voices that we keep adding to the conversation. And it's crazy that the youth are so high up there though, because it's like they don't know better. It's like they don't know what to do, and a lot of times adults don't know what to do. And I think that's the problem, is that we failed to educate people on what to do in these situations. Now, we shouldn't downplay it. I agree with that. I think it should just be a regular conversation that people have. Like, if someone needs help, that way they can come out and feel like they can ask you for help, and they don't have to feel ashamed. Like, oh, hey, something's wrong with me. And instantly think, okay, we're gonna go to a therapist. Now you're gonna get pills crammed down your throat. It's not how it works, unfortunately.
mhm. Yeah, I agree.
And it's just crazy because it's like when you talk to people, you have different answers because different generations are raised differently. And I think a lot of people tend to avoid them because they're like, well, we didn't talk about it when we were younger. My dad never talked about this problem. And like you said, a lot of people don't have diagnosis. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
they don't have a problem of some sort. It's just some people just don't want to know, because then it's like, now I have to deal with this, and then I have to tell people about it, and then it gives them a label. And I think that that's what the big fear is, that the label, once you get labeled as schizophrenia or something like that, people think that they're going to treat you differently just because you have these different things, because based on what they know versus what the actual facts are about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pluses and minuses with diagnosis and getting, like you said, a label. I mean, the first thing is, having that, let's turn the word label around to more positive, having that validation of what you're going through
Hmm.
and giving it, putting a name on it is very medicalized. It's very like, that's what doctors do, right? And it makes sense. We have to figure out what the symptoms look like. We have to figure out how to treat these conditions.
Yeah.
On the other side, like if in my mind, like, I mean, sure, bipolar is a label that I've, accepted in a lot of ways. I mean, I do a lot of work around raising awareness about bipolar and other conditions. But what I like to do is it's really symptoms based. So if they had given me a diagnosis of like some other word that I could make up on the spot, but don't want to right now.
No, I get you. No, I get you.
Then that would have been the name they gave it. And so what it is really about for me is like, what am I dealing with day to day? When I wake up in the morning, how am I feeling? What can I do to stabilize myself? What can I do to manage my mental health? Like those are all the important things. Yes, you have to have a grouping, but how are you going to deal with it? And so, there's pluses and minuses to that. It's easy to throw a name on something and to label it. At the same time, it provides a community. Like I would have found all the different people in my I facilitate the support groups. I never would have bound together with them. Just like the word punks, right? Like the word punk is a label, right? You're putting a label on someone saying, oh, that person's a punk because they like punk rock.
Yeah.
Well, like you said before, like I listen to all kinds of music. I take the word punk as a identity, and I kind of accept that, but it's just a word, really. And what it means is more to do with like, these are the things I do in my life, right? I advocate for myself and my health. I love my family and friends. I support them. When I do with music stuff, I always do it in like the most ethical way possible. And, I do challenge authority, and like, these are all punk things.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
The word punk is just a word that someone threw out there at one point.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because like what was it that when we SLC punk was always a big powerful one back in the 90s for me when I saw it originally, because they lived that lifestyle and they were talking about it all the time. And Bob was always the big like one that was always like screw authority and things like that. And then you had Matthew Broderick. Oh, what was the guy? I'm trying to think of the other guy's name is now, but the other guy was with them was always trying to keep them in control and things like that. But it was my appeal to it was I just liked the music itself. It was great. It's something new I haven't heard before when I discovered it. And then I started digging deeper and I found bands like Anti-Flag and some of these other ones that you start digging into. And then I had a friend in college, he was big in them. So then I learned about a whole bunch of other ones, and things like that. It was so cool to see, and it was interesting because it was something new. I didn't know what it was. I wanted to know more. I liked it. I liked the tempo. I loved the music itself was great. It did have a message though, like NoFX always had the message too of different things and all those kind of guys. Everybody had a purpose with it, as if any music does, and it was great though, because when you had a rough day and you just want to mellow out, that's what you just turn on some music and you mellow out, whatever it is you choose at that time or whatever. And I have a whole playlist set up for when I'm having a rough day. It kind of goes up and down depending on how I feel and things like that. And I discover new people every day. I had a band called Life's Lost on here. They're a mental health advocate as well. And they were big about it. And that's what a lot of their songs are about. And I was like, yeah, and then there's the Papa Roach song, Leave the Light On, Turn the Dark Away. I love that song so much. I think I was becoming so iconic with a lot of things of, people, having a lot of things they deal with in their life, and as you said, you deal with crisis with the teens and things like that, and them thinking about having suicide ideations and all that stuff. And it's awesome, man, to hear that's the kind of stuff you're doing, and I'm thinking about doing some of that down the road when I'm more ready to handle it, because I want to give back. I want to do something for these younger guys, trying to help them out, because people already come to me already and say, hey, they talk to me a lot of things. And a lot of times all they want to do is be heard. Like they want to feel like somebody's listening to what they've got to say.
For sure. Oh, and it's also symbiotic. Like, I mean, one of the biggest ways to deal with depression is to stop isolating and get out there. And another way of, like volunteering is a really great way of, feeling like you matter in the world.
Yeah.
Like if I'm feeling like I'm the biggest piece of garbage that I could not even be here and no one would care, if that's my distorted thinking with my depression, then if I can go out there and try to help people, that can kind of alleviate that a little bit, and so that's, I think, why I did it when I was feeling horrible and didn't even know what my day was going to look like. I had nothing to do in my mind. I had I had nothing. And so starting to volunteer was a helpful thing for me. And I also think, psychologically, we all have to have a community and an identity and a belonging and all these things that come with the punk scene. So even though I was feeling like I was nothing, I knew that the punk was out there, and they talk about how, like, oh, you're listening to angry music that's like really fast and screamy. Well, then you're going to be an angry person. And that's totally not the case.
I hate that deception. They always say everything's angry. Yeah. It's not angry, dude. It's somebody, like you said, telling a story, or they're saying a message, and that's just the way they're verbalizing it. Whether it's metal or it's punk or it's rap or it's something.
And the idea that like loud music can calm people down seems really foreign to a lot of people, but in fact, when I'm feeling the worst, I put on some punk or some metal, because even though it's chaotic and loud and wild, like, it does calm my system. because there's things that I'm latching onto, whether it's a message or a musical phrase, or it's calming my brain. And also the reinforcement that there's people out there who are feeling the same way, that they
Mm-hmm.
also relate to the punk rock. And going to concerts is a big thing for a lot of punks, because you go to the concerts and metal heads, right? You go to the concerts and we're all wearing the band shirts, like, oh, cool. And you start to talk to each other, and you really identify with each other. Next thing you know, you're like bear hugging someone in the pit and screaming and crying and yelling and having a great old time. So
It's
yeah, I
just
think
funny too,
it's
because my wife's never been to a concert before, so she would understand all that stuff. Like, yeah, man, me and a friend, we went and saw somebody, and we got in a pit, and it was great. We had a great time in there, man. And there's guys that was younger than I was, like in their teens somewhere. They were in there, and we were all just having a great time. And that's a great thing about music; it just brings everybody together. It doesn't matter how old you are; you all could still relate to the same thing. We all love this band. We all love their bands like this band. And I hate when people say that stupid shit about, oh, well, it's so angry. I'm like, but is it really angry though, or is it that you just don't understand the message that they're saying, or you don't get that feeling? Because sometimes you just want to let out that big growl, or you want to let that big shout, or you want to let that big scream, or that long note that just kicks out. You know what I mean? It feels so great just
yeah,
to release all that angry energy or the tension you have in you. And it's almost like its own version of sound therapy, which, that's an interesting thing too. Different instruments making different noise. And it's like, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones was kind of like that too. They had like all the instrumentals, Real Big Fish was big back then. And some of the other ones, like They May Be Giants, all added in that different elemental instruments, and they had those like
yeah,
horns and saxophones and all that cool stuff and on it. So it added another level of just chaos that's going on at the same time. But you're
for
just in
sure.
harmony because it's so great, because that's what you want.
Yeah. Oh, I did want to mention, and Pete, I don't know if you know that. I guess you probably don't know this, but the guy from Anti-Flag was outed as a sexual predator. So just to give you that bit of information, that
Really?
a lot of people aren't
I
listening to
didn't
that
know
band
that.
anymore. And
Damn, that's
yeah, it
crazy.
was happened about 3 years ago, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. It shook up the punk scene quite a bit. And things like that, when they happen within the punk scene, it's very self-regulated, and we're not going to really take that stuff. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a really good part about punk rock, is that we do have this responsibility to the punk scene, or to the punks, that if something happens, we're going to take care of ourselves and make sure we support each other. There was a lot of victims of him, so that those people, I hope, got the support they needed. And
Yeah,
but
me
I
too,
just wanted
man.
to mention that, because
No,
some of these
that's crazy,
bands, they
man.
have histories, and just because they're in the punk scene doesn't mean they're going to be necessarily
No, I hear you.
good
No, no, it's a
people.
good point to
Yeah,
bring up though, because that's insane. Like he used his popularity to basically prey on these people, and it's just that's sad. And it's kind of like the same thing with, what was it, that guy from Drake and Josh? The one guy was just like grooming people, and then the guy from that '70s show, everybody's Danny Masterson,
mm,
everybody's like getting mad because everybody was asking for something to happen to him. Like, this guy did a heinous thing. I hope you understand. Like, he traumatized somebody. Like, people don't come back from that sometimes, and I don't think people realize the after effects. And the same thing goes with war. Everybody's like, "Oh, let's go to war." Yeah, okay. So, what is the aftermath? Do you ever think about what happens when those people come back and have to deal with PTSD and things like that? And these guys have moments where they just go completely blank, and they're in the moment. They don't even hear you around you. They're in the moment again of what's happening, and they're freaking out. It's like, oh, that's great. Hey, look, there's your product of war you wanted so bad, but you
yeah,
don't look at the flip side of what the consequences are of these things, and it's horrible here, man. It really is. I just That's so shocking. And I mean, at the same time, like with all these celebrities coming out and these all popular people and things, like it's just like it's good. I'm glad people hold them accountable though, because it's ridiculous, man. It's like we can't sit there and act like we didn't see it. Like the whole P Diddy thing that came out, that was just, yeah. They were like so shocked, but at the same time, it's like we just watched the Nickelodeon documentary about the one guy that was basically the creepiest dude you've ever met, and he's doing weird things. Like nobody said anything then, and now you're mad now. It's like, oh, you're shocked now, but a lot of you that were back then had seen these things and said nothing about it. And that's the problem,
yeah,
is that I don't think enough people speak up about it. It's like, if you see something, say something to somebody, man, because like that's somebody's psych that you're messing with later on, that you don't know what's going to be after effects after something happens to these people. And I met a girl.
yeah,
She told me that her dad had molested her when she was young, and you could see she was all twisted up about it, and it was hard. It was harsh, man. It was just like, Jesus. It's like, and when she went to get restitution about it, her dad was like, "Oh no, you're crazy. You're making this up." And all these people around her were saying the same thing. "Oh no, you made this up." I'm like, huh? How is she making
yeah.
this up?
Well, also there's like the stress dialysis method, not to get
Mhm,
scientific, but um, that talks about how combination of stress and
mhm,
environmental factors and psychological contributions can kind of like create this perfect storm. And that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. I had my own trauma from when I was a kid. It combined with all the stress in my life that was going on, family, work, all these things came together in this huge ball. At the same time, I had, a latent, almost like a little popcorn seed in my head that ignited when all this was going on, and then I was onset of bipolar. I think bipolar was always there for me since I was quite young, but it hadn't really like popped off like that until I was actually in my late 40s or I guess mid 40s when I was diagnosed. So it's quite late in life. Yes, I was exhibiting those kinds of behaviors earlier, but I think it's that those things come together in your life at a certain time, and you can only hold things back for so long before the dam bursts.
Yeah. So let me ask you, man. Internationally renowned podcast. You got to tell me every time you hear that, that's got to feel great. Like people around the world listen to your podcast, and and you run into people. I'm sure they say, "Hey, man, I've heard your show before." That has to feel
Yeah.
great, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does feel good. I try to distance myself from the chatter a little bit. I feel
Yeah.
like I got away from social media because I had a really bad addiction to it, and that was actually part of the whole. Like I talked about the perfect storm,
Hmm.
and my eventual psychotic break. But I like to hear these genuine, like people will email me once in a while. I'll hear from someone in person. That really feels good. I also feel like I wanted to, again, I kind of had to do something, right? I mean, like I knew there was going to be results on the other end of people like getting something out of it. But ultimately, at the beginning, especially, it was for me. Like I needed to have these conversations. I needed to learn. I didn't know what was going on. I felt lost. And so by talking to people who had similar stories or conditions, that really helped me. And so not to sound selfish, but that was the reason I started these things.
No, it's not
Um,
selfish
now,
at all.
now that they're out, now that they're out in the world, people are getting stuff back from it, and that's really cool. And I think the folks I talked to they got something out of it as well because they had a chance to tell their stories. And like we said before, that's not a really a thing that happens very often in the world, that you can sit down for an hour and really talk about what you went through.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people learn more about him, and I think a lot of reactions I get from people are like, "Oh no, I didn't know that at all about certain people," and it's like that's so
Yeah,
cool because we just had a conversation. It's it's not an interview; it's just basically two people having a conversation about a topic. So, and I don't
yeah,
think it's selfish, honestly, man, that you started it for yourself because that's how this started. I was kind of like I was on my own journey trying to figure things out, and I wanted to know more, like what other things are out there that I don't really understand. And then, the unknown out there is just what got me going. And I'm happy to say now I'm up to 151 interviews between now and in October right now, just different people that want to be on this show that want to talk about something or share something. And it's so cool that it's taken off so fast. And it's surreal for me at times because all I'm doing is just offering a space for someone to come and share their thoughts and everything else. And to me, it's like it feels great when people say, "Hey, I appreciate what you're doing," or I like to ask people, "Hey, how's your mental health?" And a lot of people are just like, now it's a going thing that everybody asks, like, "Hey, Pete, I asked because of you," and it's like, well, just because of me, they started asking these questions to people, and and as I started growing. And the community started getting bigger. I started finding other people like-minded like me. And the thing with social media, I agree. I take breaks at times. Like sometimes it's overwhelming. So like I'll just kind of teeter off. I'll just tell people I was busy. I don't tell them I took a break. I just say I'm busy. Because I am
yeah,
usually busy working on something else. Or what like that. And then learning how to balance everything in life and make time for other things and stuff like that. So and then my wife and my friend had actually posed that question the other day to me. Said, "Are you doing too much?" Like, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not, but it's I'm still figuring this out as I go. I'm still only 7 months into podcasting itself. I'm still figuring out how this all goes. I got a network deal, so now I'm with the network now. So now I have more exposure. And I'm being heard around the world type thing. And it's great because, I get to meet new people from different countries and different walks of life and all these different people doing different things. And we get to highlight what they're doing, and at the same time, I'm learning stuff too, so
yeah. You're also internationally renowned.
am I now? Oh yes, there we go.
Yeah, there you go, around the
Heck
world.
yeah. That's
Well,
so
that's
cool though.
amazing. Amazing that you did that. You've done that many interviews in such a short amount of time. It's
Oh, I've got
it's
151
a
more
lot
to
of
go
work.
too. Yeah. I got a
A
lot,
lot of
man.
work. Yeah,
It is,
excellent.
but I don't feel like it's work though, man. But if you enjoy it, it's not work. Like honestly, it's so cool.
Yeah,
I get to meet different authors and different people. different podcasters like yourself, musicians. I've had a couple on, like Alive and Stone, Brian from Alive and Stone. I had a guy named Bryce from Pretty Suspect. They're out of Oregon. The guys from Life Lost came on. Lucy Nora's been on. Things like that. And I just try to mix it up to give everybody an idea that everybody deals with something. And it doesn't matter who you are, musician, person, author, CEOs of all these other companies and things like that. And we all came together for the same thing. And mental health has brought us all together for this one purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask you though, what is the coolest guest you've had so far on the show? Like, is there anybody that you've like idolized, you wanted to come on and they just said, yeah, I'll come do it?
Yeah, there's been a few like musicians that I really respect that have come on, or ones that I really followed through the years.
Did you fanboy during the interview at all? Did you kind of like have to keep?
No, I try not to. Well, I wrote about music for a long time. I think it was
Yeah.
almost 25 years. So I'd gotten used to like not throw it. They say that you should never, when you're interviewing someone for, especially for print, you should never say it off the bat, "Hey, I'm a huge fan," because it sort of alters the whole interview after that. So usually you'd throw that in at the very end.
Yeah.
So no, not really. But I think I had some people on that I really learned a lot from. Like I had a guy that I kind of crossed paths with through the years, and always heard his name, named Sasha Altman de Bruhl, and he was involved with something called the Icarus Project, which was a community mental health organization
That's awesome.
Bred in the punk scene. And I actually brought him back for episode 100 because the first interview we had done together was just had such an effect on me with the concepts he was talking about. And I adopted a lot of those concepts for myself with my own versions. And so brought him back to talk to him for another half hour. And that was great. I've had some musicians that have kind of gone on to be quite big, like, Ammo and the Sniffers. There's like a band, a rock band. So I had her, Amy Taylor, on, and that was really cool. And it's more about the personalities, and they're all really great. I mean, I haven't had any duds.
Yeah.
But I think that there's certain personalities that really shine in an interview like this. And those are the ones that I appreciate the best. I mean, like I said before, right from the very first episode, I had Todd from a band called Propagandy, who I'd been friends with for a long time. And Jacob from Converge was one that, the Converge is quite a big band. So but they don't necessarily, they all measure up pretty equally. I've had people who come in who are, clinicians who work in mental health for youth, and they happen to be, kind of bred in the punk scene. Like they came up on punk, and it's like, no one really knows them as being a musician or like a name that you would recognize, but they have all these great ideas because they have their own perspective working in that field. So yeah, it's been really, really cool having all the different, even though the podcast idea is fairly narrow in the sense that it's punk rock and mental health. There's just so much variation within that. People doing all kinds of things, all walks of life, and dealing with all kinds of different diagnoses and life situations. So it's been really great.
Okay, so here's a new thing I've been asking people. So here's the question of the episode. All right, if you could break the stigma for mental health for one thing, could be many things, whatever you choose, what would that be right now? I know it's an.
I think instead,
question.
Yeah, it is. It's a very, very good question. I think instead of just saying, "How are you doing?" or "How's it going?" or "Hey," we should actually really figure out a way to turn that around into a health, not just like how's your health, but like into a really serious question about how someone's doing. And it's hard because you don't want to stop someone on the street and be like, how you doing? How's your mental health? How, you don't want to get too heavy. But I think the flip side is it's just kind of too flippant and light. Like we're always going to say, "How you doing?" You're always going to say good. You might say okay. You might say, "Well, not too bad." You're never going to say, well, some people do, but more often than not, you're not going to say horrible, or I've been having some really major health crises lately, or, I've been having really dark depression because I lost a good friend of mine. Like, you're not going to get that, right? And I'm not saying that you have to get into those conversations in a really deep way, but I think there has to be a way to at least leave it open for people, not just to say, "Oh, I'm doing okay," and then they sulk away because they've been depressed for 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good point there.
So I don't know how that looks. I've been trying to figure it out for a long time. I have one friend who just says, you see them on the street and they say, "Oh, how are you doing? Are you happy?"
That's it's funny you say that. Are you happy?
Yeah.
It's funny you say, "Are you happy?" though, because I interviewed a woman named Vanessa the Vivacious. She runs the podcast Humanity 2.0. Before that, she had worked on a project where she went around asking people that same question: "Hey, are you happy?" and then recorded what they said. Well, the account she was working with and the project they were with had like 4.6 million followers. Of just asking that question to people, like, "Hey, how are you happy?" and then recording the responses they had. So Vanessa had taken some of the extra footage they didn't have and had started a podcast called Humanity 2.0. And she was telling me about it a bit, and I was like, that's so crazy, because all you're asking is one question: "Hey, are you happy?" And then people have to answer the question how they feel. Like, hey, you're not leaving them that one word answer of like, "Hey, how are you?" and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm doing okay," and that's all you're going to
Yeah.
get. And it some people can't sense it, but I have this uncanny ability. I can tell a lot of times. You can read the body language of people and see like something's wrong. Like, "Hey, are you really doing okay? Are you sure everything all right?" And you
Mhm.
don't want to pry too much, because then you don't want to push them away and be like, they'll be like, "Well, hey, I already said I'm good. Don't keep pushing farther." And
Yeah.
maybe one day we'll have the correct answer, the correct questions to ask, how to get to that level of people. But I do know a lot of people that have used that, "Hey, how's your mental health?" have gotten a lot of interesting results. People tend to open up and tell them things like, and stuff like that in different settings. So it's interesting to hear, and maybe one day we'll have the actual answer to what the
Yeah.
right question would be. But we got to start the conversation somewhere.
Yeah,
And
that may be one of the candidates would be how's your mental health, because people always ask, well, how's your health? And then they talk about,
mhm.
they had a cancer diagnosis 10 years ago and they've been doing well and they haven't had remission, they haven't had a relapse or whatever. Like, you're now getting into a health question. So most people are willing to talk about, having how their broken leg has been healing,
Yeah,
but maybe
exactly.
not so much mental health. So that could be a really good one. How's your mental health?
Well, even
Um,
how's your mental health could relate to people that have cancer, like you just said. Like, "Hey, how
yeah,
you doing? Guess what? You have cancer. That's it." You don't
yeah,
know what their state of mind is. You don't know what they're going through, that chemotherapy and all that other stuff they're going through. It's got
yeah,
to be a rough diagnosis. You hear that. And usually cancer is associated with death for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't make it out and you don't know which kind you have. And then when you find out what it is, it's like, "Oh, we have stage 4." And then everybody starts treating you differently. And then it's like you start altering people's mind states, if you think about it, because, you already know what's happening. And you don't want, you want people to understand that you understand this is, but you don't want them to feel like, all right, well, I'm already dead at this point. So what's the point of
yeah.
continue living? Because, and I get
Another
that,
thing Another thing that we do in the support group community is we actually, and this is a bit more, kind of pragmatic, I guess, or cold maybe, but we rate ourselves on a scale. So
oh,
every
yeah.
beginning of the meeting, end of meeting, we give ourselves a rating. So, like what I've done a couple of times, and it, with mixed results, is like someone will say, I'm fine or I'm okay, and you kind of sense they're not doing well.
Yeah.
I'll say, oh, well, what about on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how are you feeling? And they say, oh, I'm feeling like a 4. And like, at least
Yeah.
you're, but it doesn't really necessarily work in out there. It's definitely very valuable in the support group community. But you're looking for ways for people to open up, and at least giving them the chance to open up, and they may
Yeah.
not want to, and that's totally fine. And I wish that when I was really depressed or even really manic, that someone had said to me, hey, like, how are you doing? I've noticed that you've been feeling, it seems like you've been quite low, or it seems like you've been kind of erratic, and kind of like, it seems like you're really scattered, or whatever the manic symptoms would have been. And actually, it's like getting like, it's sort of like slowing down and kind of recalibrating a little bit, because the person saying this to you, like, oh, wait a second, yeah, I have been running around for a week with no sleep. Maybe
Yeah.
I do need to settle. Do need to settle myself. Or, oh yeah, I have been inside for the last 6 days and haven't seen another person. Maybe I do need to look at that. So, yeah, it's tricky. We don't have those kind of relationships for the most part in the world, unless it's close friends and family. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that separate and divide us, and so
Yeah.
hoping for ways for us to maybe close that gap a little bit. And certain things are helping, certain things aren't.
I absolutely love when you ask the rating of 1 to 10, because me and a guy I met through TikTok, and now we talk all the time, named Matt. He and I, that's why I ask him, "Hey, how you feeling today?" And it's just a constant. We always check in on each other. "Hey, how's it going?" I try to check on him, because he has a lot really bad. He suffers from really bad, depression and things like that. So, and he always gives me a rating. And it's funny you say that, because I was like, damn, that's the same thing we do. He goes me a number 1 to 10, and I was like, oh man, I'm sorry. What's up? And that starts the conversation. And if he'll answer, sometimes he'll answer, sometimes he won't. He'll say if he's he's down, but it takes him a little bit to warm up for a lot of people. and things like that. And I
Mhm.
think, it's okay. And I think this just goes out to everybody that it's okay to ask somebody how they're doing, but if you're going to ask, be ready to listen. Don't sit there and not listen to them. Because if these people are going to tell you what's wrong with you or what their feelings or what they're wrong and what they're having a bad day, maybe they just want you to listen. Don't just shut them off and everything else ignore them. Actively engage in the conversation with them. It may be an uncomfortable conversation and bring up something you don't want to talk about, but you ask them at the end of the day, hey, how's it going and things like that. So now if they're answering you, just don't brush them off because they can tell that, and they're going to be less likely to talk to somebody because they'll be like, well, I don't feel like anybody's going to listen to me even if I talk, and it's a horrible feeling. And it's great, that you're doing support groups and things like that. And it's awesome to see, man. I'm really happy to hear, Jason. That's awesome, dude. Like, because you make a difference in people's lives every day with those. I'm guaranteeing it, man. Some of those guys have a rough day,
Yeah.
come to get together and get that support they need from other people. And it's so cool to hear, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really it's a two-way thing. I get a lot of it as well.
Yeah, I bet you do,
Yeah.
man. Because it probably feels accomplishing that you're making some difference in someone's life just by letting them be heard, or just giving that support they want to hear. Hey, man, it's
Yeah.
okay. I'm here if you want to listen, and,
Well,
and
and I
things
get
like
it
that.
back from them too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's to get involved in those kind of communities. Like, I'm getting back as much as I'm giving. That's the whole concept of it. Is you and I sit down and together, and you listen to me, I listen to you, and we help
Yeah.
each other. And if it's not modeled like that, it's like you said before, people are just going to feel like alienated.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're setting up this environment that you're not following through with. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Yeah.
powerful to get people together who have things that they feel like they understand each other, and even in a small way.
Yeah.
I think a lot of
Exactly.
people that are more out about their mental health conditions do feel really alienated, and don't feel like they're understood.
Mm-hmm.
Especially by like outside society or whatever. And then also there's the breaking down the different diagnoses. Like if someone has like a generalized anxiety diagnosis, yes, all those people can have different versions of that
Yes.
condition, but there's so much overlap as well. And so like right away you can relate to someone when they say, for instance, I'm having this horrible feeling in my chest and I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And they
Mm-hmm.
may be like, oh yeah, that's happened to me too. It's maybe a panic attack. Or whereas some people might say, oh, you must be having a heart attack. Like that's a really weird example, but you know what I'm saying? It's like
I think for
we
your
understand
point,
each other.
I absolutely love the point where you say that everybody may have the same thing, but it's different for everybody. I cannot stress that enough. That is the great thing about this is when you have people that come on with the same condition and have different things, it gives people the idea that listen, not everybody has everything. You could read in a book what it says classifies that, but that's not what always
Mhm.
happens. And your point was amazing that you said that everybody has different things and may have the same thing, but they show different things that'll show up in there. And I think it's a great point. Is that people need to understand is that just because people have like schizophrenia or they have bipolar, they have borderline personality disorder, not everything is going to show up for them. Everybody has a different set of symptoms that go with their different diagnosis or whatever else it is. And I think that people don't know enough. And I think people MD way too much, honestly, these days. Like WebMD
Yeah.
was great, but I feel like they just go on there and I could relate to the panic attack feel. I was taking some meds for my anxiety, man, and I was standing there and it felt like I was going to have a heart attack. Like my heart was racing 1,000 miles. And I'm like, yeah, this probably shouldn't be happening right now, And it's so horrible that it's like, these medications we have and the side effects that come with it. And having panic attacks is terrible because I've had a couple myself and it's horrible. And you don't want to tell people around you what's going on. Like they can see you're in distress, but you don't want to tell them what's up because they don't know how to react or they'll start freaking out and make the situation even worse. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's so hard because, a lot of people are not educated in what goes on in these situations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I think there's a lot of overlap as well, but I think it's important to remember that everybody's different, and also, I don't want to get too much into medication
No,
discussion
don't have
because,
to.
again, with medication, like it is so different for each person. I can take the
It
same
is.
pill that you're taking, and it might be a completely different reaction. And one of the things that we don't do in our support groups is we never name a trade name of a drug. We always just say antidepressants because
Yeah.
as soon as I say I'm on this drug and it's really great for me and I'm just doing so well, and you're like, well, maybe I should try that. And for you, it's completely the opposite, right? So, we have to be careful about the differences that we have with these conditions, but also embrace the overlap that we've got, because that's where you get true understanding. And again, with the punk scene, it's like you walk through the show, the doors of a punk show and automatic
Hmm.
or a metal show, and automatically you know that you're going to have common interests and common opinions and common struggles as people that are in there. And yes, some are going to be off on the side and not really in the same wheelhouse. But for the most part, you go to a metal show, people are there to pick you up in the pit. They're there to protect you, and they're there to like have fun with you. And
Hmm.
with punk rock, same thing with punk rock. They're there to rally against a certain cause, or so yeah, remembering that we're all unique, but also remembering that if you can find common elements with other folks, you get all kinds of benefits from that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you can relate to other people when you find commonalities, like you were saying before. And it's great, and it's so great to hear that you're doing all this stuff, man. So, where can they listen to the podcast at?
Scream Therapy Podcast is at screamtherapyhq.com. So HQ as in headquarters. You can find it all over the place on different, Apple and all those different. I'm not going to rattle off a bunch of corporate names, but you know where you find podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, it's
I
on
pretty
there
much
as
say
well.
I say like Spotify down the yard radio. So I say I'm like I'm
Yeah,
not gonna listen to them
yeah,
all. You already know where I'm at. Damn it, go find
yeah,
them.
yeah.
You know,
Just Google Scream Therapy Podcast and you'll find it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
for sure. And if you go to the website, there's also information about the book and other things that I'm doing. So again, that's screamtherapyhq.com.
so you doing anything interesting coming up while we're getting ready to wrap up here pretty soon?
I'm playing a lot of music right now. I'm fairly new to it. I've always been into obviously listening to it, and I always put
What
on
what kind of
shows, and
instrument do you play?
I've been playing guitar.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
And I've always screamed in bands. I've always been like, "Ah," like that's always been my thing. But I'm trying to become, learn how to play guitar in a way that like, I can sing and play guitar at the same time. It's been really fun. I'm in a band here that we don't have any, like we're just a local band. Don't really
Okay.
have any recordings or anything. And I'm also still putting on shows, and, I haven't been writing much at all. I've just been trying to focus on other things, and like, writing a book is a lot of work, and my brain needed a rest from
Yeah.
that side of things.
Well, that's so cool though, man. You're gonna write. You're doing some music yourself and everything else, and you're
Yeah,
immersing
and the
yourself in the
podcast
scene.
comes out every 2 weeks, so that's always like, it's
There you
always
go.
the time to do it and stuff. So
So there you go, guys. Every 2 weeks, a new episode comes out. Okay, make sure you catch up on his other stuff too. That's awesome though about the band, man. You will have to keep me posted. Let me know when you guys start. If you guys start posting anything, I'd love to listen to it and hear what you got.
yeah, for
Do you
sure.
guys have any influences or anything? Any people that have influenced your sound, or you just kind of doing your own thing?
People keep saying that we sound like Fugazi, which is, I don't know if you know Fugazi, but
Yeah.
they're like my favorite band of all time, and they're
Oh, that's
just such an
awesome.
amazing creative musical project. So like to be compared to it is just like, no, like I don't want to hear it. It's almost like embarrassing in some ways, because but it's great to hear it. It's great to be compared to such an amazing life affirming band. But I
Well,
don't know.
it
Yeah,
might
I
be helpful
wouldn't
for you to hear
put too
that
much
Brian
stock in
from
it.
Alive and Stone said this when we were interviewing. He said that if you're not mimicking somebody's sound, then you're not doing music right. Because everybody borrows from everybody, basically. You take some sound from here, you take a little sound from there. Think of like all the mixture projects around there. It's like a perfect circle. I had a mixture of all the guys together. Mushroom Head was a mixture of all the guys together. What was that other one? The Blink 182 band, they had 15 different spinoffs because they couldn't decide what they wanted to do at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody came together to make these different bands. So like if you sound like somebody, that's even better. Flattery's
Yeah.
imitation's the best form of flattery, as they like to say.
Especially if
So
it's by accident. If it's by
right.
accident, it's even better.
This is like I like to
Right.
apologize. I idolize you guys, but I didn't mean to sound like you. But I'm sure they love it though. They'd love to hear you guys, sounding similar to them because that's think about it. All these tribute bands and things that do tributes to like Metallica and all these guys have been around forever and Aerosmith, all them other things. It's just so cool to see that. And then when these guys say, "Oh, I've heard your stuff," then it's like, oh my God, really? They're listening to me, kind of thing. So, but well,
Yeah.
Jason, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been great. I really appreciate you taking some time to come and talk to us, dude. Like I said, guys, go check out Jason's podcast, Screen Therapy. Read the book. I definitely am. I'll have to reach out when I get a chance to read it. I'll definitely reach out and let you know what I think about it. I think it's been awesome having you here, man. It's been great. I really loved everything you had to say. I love what you're doing. Keep me posted, like I said, on the band. Let me know if there's anything new coming up, and I'll definitely give it a shout out here for everybody to see. So in case they want to go check it out and stuff like that. And do you want to say anything?
Cool.
Anybody want to give anybody a shout out before we close out?
I just want to say thanks to you and for doing this. Like we talked before. It is a lot of work. Yes, it's
Yeah.
enjoyable. Yes, we get something out of it, but there is time spent and there's things sacrificed to be doing these kinds of things. Like I could be doing other things, but this is what I've chosen to do. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, good for you, and keep doing it. And it sounds like you're really passionate about it, and that I think is the most important thing.
Yeah, man, I am, and I appreciate those kind words. I really do, man. It's a love labor. It's so I love doing it. It's great. I've enjoyed it, and no end to where this thing's gonna go from here, man. I still got 150 interviews to go, so we'll see how that goes, man. That one, we'll be like,
Good
"Hey,
luck.
Peter, you still alive? Are you okay?" I'm like,
Yeah,
"I'm making it
yeah.
on life support, man."
Yeah, I'll message you and say, "What's your rating between 1 and 10 on how, like, exhausted
Okay.
you are right now?"
Basically like, "Hey, man,
Yeah,
after 150 episodes, how do you feel right now?" "Oh, well,
yeah.
I'm making it."
Yeah.
All right,
All
guys.
right, thanks a lot, Pete.
All right, guys. I'm gonna wrap up this episode of Pete for Society. Once again, Jason, thanks so much for coming, guys. You know where to find me. I'm a Pete for Society on everything from TikTok down to X. I'm on your Spotify all the way down to Apple to podcasts and everywhere else you find your podcast at. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing to be kind to somebody. One kind act you can do can save somebody's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete for Anxiety, signing off saying, don't ask how your day is, ask how your mental health is today.